Welcome to First Presbyterian Church of Dallas. My name is Charlene Jin Lee, one of the pastors here. On behalf of my colleagues Amos and Megan and all the staff and the wonderful congregation of First Presbyterian Dallas, welcome. We're delighted that you have made your way to be with us. We are delighted that Father Boyle and Samaje and Danny from Homeboy Industries, located in Los Angeles, are guests of our city and guests to our church this evening and among us. I imagine that you are here because you have heard something a little bit about Homeboy Industries and Father Boyle, so I won't go into a whole long introduction. But to say that one of the things that I really loved reading about in Father Boyle's most recent book, The Whole Language, The Power of Extravagant Tenderness, is that Homeboy Industries wants to be the porch of a house where you will want to come, where you will all belong. And that if Homeboy Industries were a volume, he said, we would be loud. And I wondered, what would they be saying? And I think they would be saying, we belong to one another. And that's something that I've loved to say. I belong to God. So I belong to you, and you belong to me, and we belong to one another. And it's a treat to be able to hear from lived experience what it's like to imagine and become a family of kinship, even though we are meeting each other for the first time, to have the freedom to say, I belong to you, and you belong to me. We're going to have a brief introduction of Homeboy Industries by video. You've read about it and heard about it. I think to hear the stories and images of what the world of kinship, radical kinship, and beloved belonging looks like might be a good way to begin our evening.
Homeboy's success certainly is based on that we have grown many leaders from within the organization.
After 2 tries in prison, that life wasn't for me, and I wanted to change. My mutual friend told me, hey, come down to Homeboys and you might be able to get a job.
I was at a dark place in my life. My family wanted me to get right. I wanted to get right.
When I was in prison, I always thought nobody was advocating for us. To a lot of people in prison, we're just a number. They could judge us whatever way they want, but once they get to know us, they get to know the real us.
Every person that comes in that door is treated with love and kinship and compassion. really good example. So what do you wish it was all about?
There's no place like Homeboy Industries.
We're willing and we're able. If called upon, we will show. Loving somebody and caring for somebody without knowing them. It's one of those things, you know, that you're just like, wow, I'm in the right place.
How you, is it on? How you guys doing? Good. Okay. My name is Samaje. I'm a navigator at Homeboy Industries. Just a brief introduction to myself. I was born and raised in South Central LA. Single home with just my mother. My father wasn't around. I got involved in gangs at an early age, like 5th, 6th grade. I was already involved, like real early. Just not having a father figure in my life. My mom did her best. She worked 2 jobs. You know, just being manipulated by the older so-called homies that was around the neighborhood, you know, seeing how they had, you know, all the girls, just the money, just being glorified, you know, it's something that I wanted in life, you know, but that was the wrong route, you know. It was a tough journey just going down that route as far as gangbanging at an early age. You know, it was taboo. I had one foot in, trying to do the right thing, one foot out, trying, you know, involved in gangs, you know. It was hard. No father, and looking up to older homies that was in the neighborhood as a father figure or a brother figure, you know, that they was misleading me, you know. My brothers is active gang members, my uncles, my grandmother, her home, you know, that's where everybody reside at and hung out. It was no hope. I had no other way to go. I ended up getting incarcerated at an early age. I think I was in like the 8th grade. I still didn't catch on. I didn't grasp it, you know. My mama was doing her best. She was getting tired, you know. At this time, the streets was grabbing me more. It was just I was being influenced by the streets even more. I didn't care about nothing but the streets. It was the benefits of the neighborhood, you know. And it just kept leading to disasters, just disasters. I ended up catching a serious charge when I was 18. By the grace of God, I ended up getting out of jail, and I'm like, I was done. I was done at that point in time. I ended up turning my life over. I started boxing, but still, I had put my blinder down with my tunnel vision, and it led me back around the same individuals that was taboo unto me, and I got involved in drugs. You know, I made it all the way to the top to where I won the Golden Gloves. I did all that. I was finna turn professional. I had over 50-some amateur fights. I was doing good. I fumbled and started going back around the wrong crowd, you know. I couldn't do everything on my own. I tried to hold it on my own. I couldn't do it. I ended up getting addicted to drugs, being incarcerated again. And when I got out, it's like, now I want to change. You know, I ended up getting a job at Cedars-Sinai, but I still couldn't hold on to it. I'm like, you know what, let me go back up to Homeboy Industries. I remember the first day I went back up there and I seen Father G. He seen with open arms. It was like, he embraced me. It was just love at first sight when he seen me. And from there, I joined the 18-month program. I haven't looked back, just the support, the hope, you know, that they gave unto me. It was like something different with the case managers, because I started in the 18-month program as a trainee. I didn't make it to the point where I'm at right now as a navigator. But I always told the case manager that I work side by side with, I'm gonna manifest this. I'm gonna be working side by side with you, you know? And within 6 months in the 18-month program, I ended up going to school to become a peer support specialist through the help of homeboys. I did a speech at the endowment for Father G, and, you know, they liked my story. I think I went to school for about like 8 weeks for the peer support specialist. I ended up getting hired at a rehab. I worked in a rehab for a while, for like 8, 9 months, but my heart was still stuck at Homeboys. I wanted to go back to Homeboys. I filled out the application as a navigator, but I still had doubt in my mind, like, dang, can I do it? Can I do it? Are they gonna give acceptance to me? And they did. They called me in for an interview, and I've been, you know, just running a marathon ever since. I ain't looked back. You know, I got my head I'm focused now. I won't deviate off the course no more, Because I know if I put one foot in negativity and try to have one foot in positivity, the negativity gonna take over. It's taboo, you know? So the journey is going good right now, but I wouldn't have been able to do it without Homeboys, without Father G being there by my side. Just waking up in the morning, getting them texts like, son, I love you. I never had that in my life, you know? I looked up to other individuals that was for the streets and really wasn't for me. You know, and anytime I tried to share my story and anything I wanted to do something positive to the older homies, they shut me down. Like, bro, no, we're not doing it that way. We're going to do it this way. You know, it was just the hope. I only get hope coming from Father Greg, you know.
Hello, my name is Danny, and I am currently a trainee at Homeboy Industries. And by the grace of God, having Samaja as my friend, he's the reason why I'm actually at Homeboy's Industry. Because like him, we grew up in the same neighborhood. I come from the gang life. But me, I end up catching a case that I wasn't able to walk away from, and I did an 8-year bid. And me coming home and trying to fill out the job interviews, job applications and going on interviews, but then when they do my background check and they realize like, okay, like he's on parole and he just came home from doing so much time. And Samaje was telling me like, come up to Homeboys, and I was kind of like skeptical, like nah, like I'm cool. But I finally just gave it a chance one day, like, okay, let me just go up here and see what they're talking about. And then he introduced me to Father G. Father G, like he said, opened me with open arms, gave me a hug. It was his first time ever meeting me. He gave me a hug and embraced me, told me to come to the program and really come up here and show that this is what I want. And for a while, I was still like, I don't know if I really want to do this. Like, I still kind of have, like he said, my foot kind of was still on the outside door of trying to go back to the streets, because that's all I knew growing up. You know, I lost my mother at an early age. I was 11 when my mother passed away, so I resorted to the streets. And like you said, the streets, they only promote the negative part of it. They weren't telling me to go to school and get my education. It took for me to go to prison to get my education, to get my GED. So when I finally did really set my mind to it, like, this is what I gotta do. Like, I have so many people depending on me, and it's so many people that rise with you and do the time with you. A lot of people don't understand that. Like, when you go to prison, your family is doing that time right along with you, when you got a strong support system. So I sat back and I outweighed all my options, and I realized, like, I need to really focus on myself and getting myself right and bettering myself, and Homeboys was the place. So Samaje is my navigator, so he helped me. I can come to him and ask him if I'm going through any struggles, him and my case manager, and I currently work in a cafe as well too. And that's actually, they just put me in the front, so I'm working the cash register and I'm making coffee, and that shows my people skills. Because for a long time at Homeboys, like, I wouldn't talk to anybody. Like, I stay to myself. Like, if I didn't know you outside of Homeboys, I didn't talk to you. But working in a cafe, it made me be a people person. It made me start talking to people more. So Homeboys have made me a better person. You know, I just want to thank Father Greg for that, and I also want to thank Samaje again for that. I really appreciate the opportunity that y'all gave me. You know, thank you.
Thank you very much for welcoming the three of us here. Thank you, Charlene and Amos and Megan. So I spoke earlier today, so I'm going to try to steer away from anything I've ever said before. I can remember once a homie named Hector, who was just 16 years old and had finally was back in school, a very super smart kid, but he had sort of stepped away from the gang, and he was enjoying the fact that he was a smart kid. And he came into my office and he was trying his hand at small talk, and he said, "Oh, by the way, I ran into a man that attended one of your talks once." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yes. He found your talk rather monotonous." I said, oh my God, he did? Well, no, actually that didn't happen, but I need practice using bigger words. So I encouraged him to practice on somebody else, you know. So I love your community, and I just sort of, you know, met you today. But everybody has been so gracious, and you kind of represent the marrow of the gospel, which is what St. Francis of Assisi always says we always need to return to. That's our vision that brings you to this beautiful church. The prophet Habakkuk writes, the vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. And if it delays, wait for it. But we don't want to wait too long, which is why I think you have the stew pot, because you're not going to wait. You're going to roll up your sleeves, which is, you know, for the first 400 years of the church anyway, that's what we were about. It was a way of life. It was, how do you put one foot in front of the next, and what should it look like? We've kind of deviated from that a little bit, a lot, but that's what it looked like. You know, it was reflective of kind of the God we have. I love the, you know, we belong to God and God belongs to us. This morning I did my walk, and I was listening to James Finley. I recommend it. It's called Turning to the Mystics. And Karl Rahner, who was a Jesuit theologian, used to say that the church of the future, or Christians of the future, will be mystics or they won't be Christian. So it's a fascinating thing, but just today he was talking about that's kind of his prayer. He sits there and he says, I belong to you and you belong to me. And I don't think we can get to belonging, a community of cherished belonging, unless we begin there with a notion of God that's really spacious. Meister Eckhart is they have 8 seasons, so I recommend this. I haven't listened to them all, but Meister Eckhart is there, and he used to say, it is a lie, any talk of God that doesn't comfort you. And I think that's somewhere deep down, we don't really believe that. We think the God is shaking her head at us and wagging her finger, but that's kind of the God we hope for, but it is the God we actually have. I remember I had a spiritual director many years ago who said to me, you know, we need a better God than the one we have. He was a Jesuit, but of course he's right, because we've settled for a partial God, and we should hold out for something larger, a God more spacious. Were you guys ever locked up in San Fernando Juvenile Hall? No. So we have had 3 juvenile halls, LP, Los Padrinos, and Central. Yeah. And then San Fernando. So I was saying Mass there, and there are about 500 gang members mainly in this gym. This was back in the day. And I had my Albon and my stole, and I was sitting in a little chair on an elevated platform, and they give you these sheets that have the readings for the Sunday in English and Spanish, so people can follow around if they only speak Spanish. And so, you know how you do when you're presiding and hearing the word, you go, I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to just listen to the word proclaimed. So I sat there with my eyes closed, and the first kid from the congregation of gang members who were locked up in this juvenile hall came up and did the first reading from the Old Testament, and then the second kid got up to do the responsorial psalm. And I don't know, there was a kind of overabundance of confidence in his voice. And he got up and he said, "The Lord is exhausted." And I said, "What the hell?" And I look at and it was, "The Lord is exalted." And I remember thinking at the time, wow, that's way better. Because we can all connect to exhaustion. as, people of a certain age here that maybe you have grandkids, and it's like, how was your weekend? Well, we had the grandkids for the weekend. I am pooped, I'm exhausted, but it's a good tired, you would say, But you know what it means? It's an extension of yourself for another person. And it's a good tired. And so how do we arrive at this notion of God that can lead us to this sense of, we belong to this God, and this God belongs to us, and this God is inviting us to a community of kinship such that God might recognize it. This God is inviting us to create and foster and nurture into place a community of cherished belonging. I'm writing another book, and so I'm calling it Cherished Belonging. There are different kind of subtitles. Love in Divided Times. Another one they're recommending is The Healing Power of Love in Divided Times. But my editor and publisher, they don't like cherished. They think it's too squishy. And so they just want belonging. So I looked it up on Amazon. The first page, 38 titles, belonging. I go, come on. I didn't even look at the second page or the third one. But cherished is, cherishing is love fully engaged. And cherishing is love in action. And so I'm insisting on it. So hopefully they'll allow me to do it. Because you want to find the tenderness of God. We receive the tenderness of God, and then we can choose to be that tenderness in the world, knowing that tenderness is the highest form of spiritual maturity. That's where we want to land. Because otherwise love stays in the ether, or in your head, or maybe in your heart. But unless it becomes tender, it's never connective tissue. And that's how our God is. Our God is tender. The incarnation is really about God wanting God to become tender, if you think about it. We all are doing Zooms, since I'd never done one before until the pandemic. But I have 5 sisters and 2 brothers, and they're all married, and they live all over the place. And once a month at 4 o'clock on a Sunday, we get together on the Zoom. And it was the anniversary of my mom's death. And, she died somewhere like in the second year of the Trump administration. This is kind of a marker for me. So, and she died the way everybody wants to die, in your home, in your own bed, surrounded by your kids. She was 92 years old, and she was sharp as a tack. The last year of her life, she watched so much MSNBC, she was becoming Rachel Maddow. But she wasn't a lick afraid of dying. I remember a month before she died, she said to me, she was exhilarated, like giddy. And she said, I've never done this before, and which is something you say just before jumping out of a plane, skydiving. And in fact, the day before she died, I walked into her room and she was asleep. And I was the only one there in the room, which never happened. And I was sitting at the foot of her bed, and she woke up and she opened her eyes and she saw me there, and she said, oh, for crying out loud. And well, she was pissed that she hadn't died, and I go, sorry. Well, the next day, as again, luck would have it, I was there at exactly noon. I think a couple of my sisters went out to retrieve lunch or something. And I was there all by myself. And exactly at noon, she lifted her head from the pillow and she opened her eyes and she let out this glorious, wondrous gasp. Skydiving. and she left us. And nobody in earshot of that sound could ever be afraid of death again. But I remember that in, her last weeks, there'd be 2 or 4 or all 8 of her kids around her bed, and she'd be in and out of kind of consciousness. But when she was in, she'd kind of look at you, and she'd lock on her eyes onto you with a laser beam focus, and she'd say with breathless delight, "You're here. You're here." And I remembered that as I buried her. I thought, I think that may well be the singular agenda of our exhausted God, is to look at you with breathless delight and say, "You're here. You're here." I mean, when you think about it, Jesus' 40 days and 40 nights in the desert, which is a precursor to Lent. And I can never utter the word Lent without saying that there was a homegirl named Michelle Nunez who used to work at Homeboy. She was a tough cookie. She came into my office one day and she said, "Well, it's official. I found out my man's been cheating on me." I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." I don't sweat it. I just went to the church, got me them ashes, gave his ass up for Lent. I'm like Pavlov's dog. I can't say the word Lent without saying Michelle Nunez. But there's this image we have of Jesus in the desert. I mean, we all have the same image. It's like grumbling stomach. It's maybe agony. Maybe it's dark night of the soul. Maybe it's he's having doubts. Well, I suspect it was probably 40 days and 40 nights of God saying, "You're here. You're here. I belong to you. You belong to me. You're here." And Jesus not knowing exactly what to say except to say, "You're here." And once you've received the tender glance, then you choose to become the tender glance in the world. That our God is not fishing for compliments, just wants you to be in the world who God is, loving, kind, compassionate. And I think that's what the task is. So Homeboy Industries has been around for 36 years. It was started when I was pastor of the poorest parish in Los Angeles, Catholic parish, Dolores Mission, very poor, public housing projects. Aliso Village, Pico Gardens, they were called, largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 gangs at war with each other. The LAPD called my parish the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in all of Los Angeles. I buried my first young person killed because of the sadness in 1988. And I buried my 261st about 3 months ago now. That's actually a long stretch, although a week ago, a 14-year-old kid named Matthew was gunned down. So we did a lot of things. We started a school because there were so many middle school, junior high age gang members who had been given the boot from their home school. Nobody wanted them. So they were wreaking havoc in the middle of the day. They were writing on the walls. They were selling drugs. They were violent. So I walked out to this particular group of very young gang members, and I would kind of isolate them. I'd say, "Hey, if I found a school that would take you, would you go?" And to my surprise, every single one said, "Yeah, I would." And then I couldn't find a school that would take them, so that kind of forced my hand a little bit. So right across the street from our church is the convent is the elementary school. First 2 floors are the elementary school, grades K to 8. But the convent took up the 3rd floor of this big concrete thing. And so one evening I sat all the nuns down. There were about 8 of them, and I sat them down in their living room, and I said, hey, would you guys mind, moving out, and we could turn the convent into a school for gang members. And I remember they looked at each other and they said, sure. And that was the extent of their discernment process. And that's what it looks like when you're living according to the marrow of the gospel, when you roll up your sleeves and choose to be in the world who God is. It looks like that. So gang members came in large numbers to the church property, not exactly to the church, but to our property across the street from the church, which created a disconnect. People in the parish would sidle up to me and they'd say, aren't churches supposed to be hermetically sealed, good people in and bad people out? Which was a good gospel challenge. And then the gang members kept saying, if only we had jobs. So myself and the women in the parish, we marched around the factories that surrounded the projects. There were only women there, really, women with children. That was the profile. And then we marched around the factories trying to find felony-friendly employers, and we couldn't find very many, hardly at all. So we started things. We had a maintenance crew, a landscaping crew, a crew to paint out graffiti, a crew to build our child care center, all made up of rival gang members from the 8 different gangs. And then in 1992, after the acquittal of the 4 police officers who beat down Rodney King, the whole city, every pocket of poverty ignited, except the poorest pocket, my parish. And so the LA Times wanted to know why this was. I said, well, I don't know exactly, except I think it helped that we had 60 strategically hired rival gang members who had a reason to get up in the morning and a reason not to gangbang the night before, and more to the point of your question, a reason not to torch their own community. And so the article appeared. The following day, I was summoned to the Beverly Hills office of a movie producer named Ray Stark, who happened to have $500 million. And he said, how should I spend my money? As I look back on it now, I can see that I woefully undershot my request, I was young, I had hair. I said, well, there's an abandoned bakery across the street from the school. You could buy it. It has ovens. They don't work, but we could fix them. I don't know, we could put hairnets on rival enemy gang members. They could bake bread. I don't know, we could call the whole thing a Homeboy Bakery. And that was the extent of my business plan. And he said, sure. So we were off and running. A month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas in the Grand Central Market in downtown LA. Once we had plural, we changed our name from Jobs for a Future, which we had called ourselves, to Homeboy Industries. And now nobody ever intends to do such a thing. We backed our way, evolved our way into now becoming the largest gang intervention rehab reentry program on the planet. So 10,000 folks a year walk through our doors trying to reimagine a different life. I suppose the first 15 years was dedicated, we were job-centric. Nothing stops a bullet like a job. That's what our t-shirt said. But now, since then, we changed. Because we had this idea that an educated gang member may or may not go back to prison. And an employed one may or may not go back to prison. But then we've landed on this truth. A healed gang member will not reoffend, period. And we haven't looked back and we haven't waffled. We believe that still. That you want to hold the mirror up to gang members and tell them the truth. Return them to themselves so that they can find their true selves in loving. And once you know that truth, once you are returned, then you are resilient and you are sturdy. And after 18 months, homies leave us, and the world will throw at them what it will, but this time they won't be toppled because they know who they are. They have been returned to themselves. We don't supply folks with a purpose, but once they find themselves in a community that sees them and cherishes them, they find their own purpose. Does it always happen? Always. It always happens. But like any rehab, sometimes people leave. And in the early days, we would fret. We would say, well, maybe he'll come back. You were there, you know. And we said the same thing. Maybe he'll come back. We don't say that anymore. We say, he'll be back. He'll be back. And we'll say, if we have to tell somebody, you know, come back when you're ready. We love you. We think you're amazing. But come back when you're ready. Like any good rehab. Does it work? It works if you work it, as they say, you know. But truly that. So let me just end with a story, and then I'm going to invite these two guys up here, and we'll just finish up the hour. You know, that's a great thing you have up there. I should have told you guys that there's a timer way up there. So if their homilies have gone over, they have not been looking upward. That's all I can say. So it occurs to universities sometimes, in particular, to sometimes high schools, to force their students to read my books against their will. And I'm not complaining. But Gonzaga University in Spokane, my alma mater, who ruins my bracket every March, invited me to speak there because they had forced their incoming freshman class to read Tattoos on the Heart. And so I said, sure, and they said, bring two homies. And I often try to bring homies who have never flown before, just for the thrill of seeing gang members panicked in the sky. Once I had two older homies at LAX airport, and one guy said to me, hey, are we flying Virgin Airlines because it's our first time? I said, yeah, it's a requirement. I will come home on American. And I try to pick homies who are enemies, rivals. That didn't happen this time since you guys grew up together, but often I do that, just so that I can, you know, have them share a hotel room just to mess with them, you know. So I invited an African-American gang member named Larry and a Latino named Mario, and they were enemy rivals. And I'm used to, you guys were experienced, so you weren't that nervous, but I'm used to homies being quite nervous. But no, the one who takes the cake is this kid, Mario. He was just so, he was hyperventilating, which I'd never seen somebody do, you know. You know, and we hadn't even boarded the plane yet, you know, and we were at Burbank Airport, which is a smallish airport, and big planes, Southwest Airlines, but you have to walk out onto the tarmac to board the plane, you know, like you're the president, and you climb up the steps to board. At the front of the plane, big feature at Burbank, there are steps to board the back of the plane. So I'm sitting there with Mario, and he's just a basket case, and Larry is walking around somewhere in the airport. And it's early morning, and first flight of the day, and our flight crew arrives, and there are two female flight attendants. Both of them have very large cups of Starbucks coffee, and they're schlepping up the steps to board the plane. And Mario goes, "When are we going to board the plane?" I said, "Well, as soon as they sober up the pilots." There they go now. Perhaps I shouldn't have said that. And I should tell you that actually Mario was in that video. Mario is arguably the most tattooed individual who's ever worked at Homeboy, don't you think? And he was in the cafe in that video, skinny guy. And but he's all sleeved out to his fingertips, neck blackened with the name of his gang, head shaved, covered with tattoos, forehead, cheeks, chin, eyelids that say the end, so that when he's lying in his coffin, there will be no doubt to anybody. And so I said, well, let me walk him through the airport, just to maybe that'll calm him down. And so as I'm walking through the airport, people are like this, and mothers are clutching their kids more closely. And I just go, wow, because if you went to Homeboy tomorrow and just walked up to anybody and said, who's the kindest, most gentle soul here? They'd think for a beat, and then they'd say, Mario. Yeah, Mario. Mario is proof that only the soul that ventilates the world with tenderness has any chance of changing the world. He's proof that kindness is the only non-delusional response to everything. So we get to Gonzaga and they say, the big talk Tuesday night and, 1,000 people. But what they don't tell you is you have to visit 93 classes before the talk. I thought, oh my God. So I told these two guys, you get up and speak just like you two did. And I said, well, I'm going to sit in the back of the classroom. And their talks were, abuse and violence and terror. And honest to God, if their stories had been flames, you'd have to keep your distance. Otherwise, you'd get scorched. I would not have survived a single day of either of their childhoods. So we get to this big arena, 1,000 people. The two of them get up and tell their stories. They do a good job. Mario's quite nervous. I get up and do my thing, and then I invite them up on either side, and I say, questions? Yes, ma'am. And a woman stands, and she says, yeah, I got a question. It's for Mario. And it's the first question out the gate is for Mario. And Mario is a tall, skinny drink of water. And he steps up to the microphone. He's just terrified. Yes. And she says, well, Mario, you say you're a father and you have a son and daughter. They're about to enter their teenage years. What wisdom do you impart to them? What advice do you give them? Mario clutches the microphone and he's trembling and he's closing his eyes and he's getting a friggin' hernia trying to come up with whatever the hell he's going to say. And when suddenly he blurts out, as soon as he says those two words, he rushes back to his microphone clutching, closed-eyed refuge. And now I know he's losing the battle against his tears. But he wants to get the whole sentence out. I just don't want my kids to turn out to be like me. And there's silence until the woman who asked the question stands, and now it's her turn to cry. Why wouldn't you want your kids to turn out to be like you? You are loving. You are kind. You are gentle. You are wise. I hope your kids turn out to be like you. And 1,000 total perfect strangers stood, and they would not stop clapping. And all Mario could do was hold his face in his hands, so overwhelmed that this room full of strangers had returned him to himself. But let there be no doubt that the people standing had been returned to themselves. Kinship, connection, exquisite mutuality, cherished belonging. I think that's the only praise our exhausted God has any interest in. It's hard to live the marrow of the gospel and to know what to do next unless we receive the tender glance so that we can become the tender glance. And that's what our vision is. And that's what your vision is, clearly. For the vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. And if it delays, we wait for it. Thank you very much. So we have about 9 minutes. And so we don't need a microphone out to you. You just go like this and you holler out whatever you want to say. And I'll repeat the question or the comment. And if it's hard, I'll pass it to one of these two guys. Anybody? Yeah.
The young guys and girls that you start school for,
Yeah, the question about the school and proactive, like gang prevention is kind of what you're saying. But this was a school for gang members, so it was really tough. We had like 3 major fights a day. That would happen all the time. We'd say, put your cell phones away. Then once we had a principal who lasted 1 day. I remember calling him the next day, and he had changed his number and apparently checked into a witness protection program. But we still have a school, so it's, but what we do is decidedly intervention. People should do prevention, but it's, we do this one thing. It's a large thing. And there aren't many places around in LA County where there are 120,000 gang members and 1,100 gangs. But prevention, what would have helped prevention to keep,
I know with the youth, the senior staff and the youth over at the Art Academy, we have I believe a football game coming up. That's a flag football game. It's against the youth, against us, the senior staff, the navigators, the security guards. So that's coming up on the 16th, I believe, of February.
Okay, good. But also, what would have helped when you were a little kid? Because you have, I don't know, was there prevention programs or anything?
When I was growing up, they had, I think it was called the DARE program, but it didn't really do too much. But to prevent us, it would have been more like, to like show us hope and tell us like there's something more out there than these streets. Because the environment that we lived in, they were just like, okay, this is what it is. Y'all grew up in this environment, like this is y'all neighborhood, so y'all gotta protect it at all costs. And it was like, it would have been way better if we had more role models that was there and really showed us the correct way to do things.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, as a senior staff, why I wasn't invited to play on this football team. But I'll work that out with somebody. Yes? The question is about church.
Yeah, I was baptized at an early age, but like I said, the streets kind of took a hold of me. So I didn't have no father figure in my life. I looked up to all the older individuals in the neighborhood that misled me, I was sneaking out behind my mom back, doing things like that, because she was trying to keep me on a positive road, but the streets had me. My mama did her best. It's a saying, the streets did the rest,
Did you go to church?
Yeah, I went to church.
Yeah.
And then on the 1st of, 2023? When I started turning myself around, Father Greg, he gave me the honor and he baptized me again at the Lord's Mission, right before I did the transition and converted to the navigator from a trainee. Yeah, so church was a big factor. Yeah, it was a big factor, but the streets had me.
Did you go to church? Was that an influence?
Yeah, I went to church, but it wasn't with my mother. My mother, unfortunately, she passed away a little early, so I never really got a chance to really go to church with her. But the neighborhood, we had like a neighborhood auntie, and she made sure, like, all the kids that lived on the block, we went to church with her every Sunday. She made sure that when we came out the house, like, they say, come as you are. So, we trying to come in white shirts, basketball shorts, and she wasn't doing that. She was like, I want dress shirts and slacks and stuff like that. So, yeah, I went to church for a little bit, but I still had the role models once I got out of church that led me back to the streets. So, but I did go to church, though.
I saw a question back there. Yeah.
Say something about your relationship with the LAPD and the other institutions.
Okay, relationship with the LAPD. So, it was not good in the early days. Again, the first 10 years of Homeboy, we had death threats, bomb threats, and hate mail. Not from gang members, but from people who demonized gang members. So it was a short hop to demonize me for helping them. And so the LAPD was, certainly a part of that in the bad old days. Of course, I grew up in LA, and when the police arrived, everybody breathed a sigh of relief. They got the cat out of the tree. But then when I came to the projects, my first experience of this was I would see gang members with their faces rearranged, and I presume they ran into some enemy or rival. And they were always reluctant to tell me, like it had a great shame attached to it. When they finally did, they told me that they were taken to the back of the projects by police and beaten down for purposes of interrogation and intimidation. Well, I was so naive about law enforcement that I went to Hollenbeck Police Station to the captain. I said, hey, I think you might want to know what's going on. Trust me when I tell you, he didn't want to know what was going on. In fact, then it became shoot the messenger. So I had a long period where they hated me. The odd thing was it kind of helped my ministry because everybody knew that the cops hated me, and that helped. The gang members kind of went, oh, okay, he's okay, And so it oddly worked in my favor. And then later on, the successive chiefs, were smart. And so they didn't talk mess about me. And then they kind of supported what Homeboy was doing. But for years, it was Homeboy fraternizes with the enemy. Outrageous things. Like, I had a file somewhere where homies let me guard their AK-47s and hold their drugs. It was preposterous. But that was demonizing is the opposite of the God we have. Absolutely opposite. God demonizes nobody ever. And so, recently I was on a panel with a rabbi and a columnist from the LA Times. in a packed auditorium. And I said, at Homeboy, we embrace two principles. Everyone is unshakably good, no exceptions. And we belong to each other, no exceptions. And then I asked the crowd, I said rhetorically, do I think that if we embrace those two principles, every complex social dilemma would disappear? Yes, I do. And the entire auditorium burst into laughter. It kind of startled me. And when the laughter subsided, I said, yes, I do. And yes, I do. I think it's the thing that would lead us to roll up our sleeves and to be in the world who God is. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Father Greg Boyle said that he wants Homeboy Industries to be the porch of the house where everyone wants to belong to, and we got a glimpse of that. I'm going to borrow your words, Greg, to close us off and bless us. We are looking for a fuller expression of a wider frame within which to view things. So allow the extravagant tenderness of God to watch over you. Permit the lavishing tenderness of God, and permit the lavishing of such love to surround and fill you. Then go into the world and speak the whole language. This is the fluency of the mystic who chooses to live in the soul, inhabiting the tender fragrance of love. The longing of the mystic is to be at home with yourself, and then put the welcome mat out so that others find a home in you. Go in peace, welcome one another even as you leave, share the peace of Christ with one another, love swiftly, welcome swiftly, and live generously and graciously towards others the way God lives towards you. Thank you for being here.